brilliant crafted. You know, you'd think that the fact that she had to be writing so late in the day would have made the quality of the novel suffer, but it certainly didn't. Hello, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Hello, Caribbean. Hello, world. Thank you for joining Page Turners Plus for another exciting book review discussion. Today we're discussing Tiphanie Yanique's Monster in the Middle. It was first released on 19th October 2021. To give you a short synopsis of the book, here's Francine.
Hi, everybody. So great to be back with you again to talk about books that we love. At its heart, Monster in the Middle is a love story about Stella and Fly. But before we read about their love story, the novel examines the role that identity, religion, culture, and family play in who and how we love. This is a multi-generational story that takes place across the US, the Caribbean, the African continent, and back again. And it tries to answer the question about who are we meant to be with. Back over to you, Paula.
All right. I'm sorry I didn't introduce myself to you. Some of you know us already. My name is Paula. The other members of the panel are Francine, Tony, Kesawa, and Eric. Now we'll go straight into the program. I'm going to ask the first question. I have to read it because I'm going to be quoting from the novel. The novel begins with a letter which says in part, when you meet your love, you are meeting all the people who ever loved them or who were supposed to love them but didn't love them enough or hell didn't love them at all. How is this idea demonstrated in the novel? Kesawa, you think you can take that one on?
Of course, with a challenge like that, how could I not?
Let me read the whole thing. The novel begins with love them, or who were supposed to love them but didn't love them enough, or hell didn't love them at all. How is that idea demonstrated in the novel?
Okay, yeah, I mean, she absolutely is that's definitely the theme that runs through it. We meet the lovers past of the. It's even a struggle to call them main characters because Fly and Stella, we meet them so late because we meet their parents. We sometimes meet their grandparents. We meet their exes before we meet the kind of the key protagonist, and we see the different experiences of love in the emotional that they have that leads up to that meeting. I think that's probably my answer.
Okay. Did you see any demonstration, for example, of what could happen to you if the people who were supposed to love you didn't love you enough or didn't love you at all? Did you see anything that would demonstrate that part of the theme of the novel?
Well, most definitely, because I think throughout we see characters who, and quite, I think, an unusual number of characters whose biological parents, for example, don't love them. So we see step parents, we see adoptive parents, and I think we see it in the character of Stephen, Stella's first husband before she meets the character. We also see it in the character of her mother, who lives in an orphanage. In an orphanage as a child. So I think particularly in the family context, that's clear. And also Stella's father, who we're introduced to him as her father. And that love for her father is kind of something that carries her throughout the novel. But then we learn that actually he wasn't her biological father, and and she always knew that. It wasn't a question. Her mother was already pregnant when they met. Actually wasn't pregnant. Her mother had the child when when they met. But Stella was a baby, so she doesn't remember life except for the father that she has. So I do think we see that, but it's not always a negative. It's also in that sense, the step parents, the adoptive parents, quite positive.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's move on to mental illness, which is another theme in the book. Eric, how is mental illness portrayed in the novel. How do you think? What do you think of how Tiffany the issue of mental illness?
I think she handled it with honesty and care. For instance, my father, we meet him begin that he hears voices and he speaks to the voices, and he actually speaks to the voices in a different accent than what the people around him hear in his normal conversation. And yes, he has some idiosyncrasies, but he's comes across as being an ingenious person. He's able. Eventually, we find out that he's able to work. He makes a living, but he has this set of baggage that I would say has little to do with his mental illness. It's type of baggage that people who don't have mental illness carry with them. So I think she presents mental illness in a normative way that we all experience either directly or indirectly.
Yeah, yeah. That was one of the things I appreciated most about the book. That mental illness was not this scary thing. It was just an illness, like diabetes or hypertension. But of course,
I mean,
sorry.
I wanted to put in a comment here. What I compare that to is early rural living in St. Vincent and Grenadines. I'm sure it's illnesses that they carry, mental. Some of them may be mongoloid. And it's amazing how that community just accepts everybody and moves on as if life is normal, and that's what I sort of got from the way she treated that whole mental illness thing. To stretch on in your point, Paul, it wasn't like a scary thing. It wasn't like this is a beast, right? It was we all exist. Yeah.
It was scary. Sorry, there is social anxiety about mental illness in the novel, and certainly Fly has a lot of anxiety about it. He's very scared that he might have inherited his father's mental illness, and I think the fact that he carries around the marbles and he never wants to let go of the marbles, I think that's a symbol of him not wanting to lose his marbles. That's how I read it. That's how I read it.
Is that one of the signs that was so obvious, Paul, but you had to read it a second time to get it?
No,
Marble collection.
No, I did. I read it twice, and I think I'm going to have to read this book about 3 more times because she has symbols everywhere. And every time you read it again, you pick up something that you missed you missed when you read it previously. I love novels like this because you can read it on a surface level, and it's a wonderful story. It's just this very nice story about this family having struggles like every other family has. But then when you read it more deeply and you start asking yourself questions, what is she saying here? There is so much packed into this novel that isn't necessarily apparent right on the surface. And I the second reading, I picked up some symbols in the first reading. The marbles I picked up in the first reading, but there are a lot of others that I picked up in the second reading, and I'm sure on a third and a fourth and a fifth reading, I'm going to pick up a lot more. I think this is a book that deserves to be read several times. This is beautiful.
Without as you're talking about symbols, and I don't want to take you off your line of questioning, but without giving a spoiler, we
hate to give a spoiler.
The diving into the belly of the whale. What's the symbol?
No, that was exciting.
Yeah, but what's symbolic about this? I'm intrigued to know what you guys.
Well, let me tell you what I think. There's a lot about the belly of the whale and the Johann. Certainly, I think Johann is meant to be reminiscent of Jonah.
Correct.
I wondered about that. Well, Jonah, I was like, I'm seeing a story here.
It's her. You Bible people would know better than me. Doesn't Jonah?
Wow. Us Bible people, you know. Wow.
Jonah is from city Nineveh or something like that. I know.
Nineveh. Mm-hmm.
So,
Nineveh City was a city of
and
sin.
right, and I think Jonah. But she said, I think it said very directly in the novel that Johann saves her. I guess he saves her from the burden of being the adult in her relationship with her father, because she has to be the caregiver of her father because he's so
Right.
old. And I think Jonah, no, I'm calling him Jonah, Johann, he does some caretaking of her and relieves some of that stress that she has of taking care of her father.
Mhm.
So I don't, but I know there is a lot more packed into the whale symbolism that I am seeing from 2 readings.
The thing that I thought about with the jumping into the whale is that the book is called Monster in the Middle, and for me, the jumping into the whale, it's as though she's jumping into the monster. So now she is in the middle of the monster. That was kind of like how I kind of looked at it.
All right,
But
so since we're there, Francine,
yeah,
what is
I mean, that was my
what
question. I was
what
like,
is
so I
what is the monster? What is the monster?
the monster is us, I think, if I am to
oh,
understand. So like the the name of the book, The Monster in the Middle, it was actually influenced by the labyrinth myth of the Minotaur, who was the monster in the middle of the labyrinth. And the question is, what happens when we get to the middle of the labyrinth? Who is the monster in the middle? And I think that the monster in the middle is us. And how do we deal with that monster? It's us, or it's our trauma, or it's our history. And
Yeah, I tend to agree with
when
Francine.
you get to the middle, you need to deal with all of that.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Francine. I think it's definitely a metaphorical answer to that question, right?
Mhm.
It's basically, to me, it's our anxieties, it's our fears, it's, and a lot of these things run through the novel. Each
Mhm.
character is laid out with the baggage, if you want. Okay, the happy moments, the sad moments, but the things that bothers them most, okay, keep surfacing and intermingling with the relationships that they form. And I think
Mhm.
Francine is hitting the nail on the head there.
But
That's
then, but
yeah.
then when the father, there's a chapter called Monster in the Middle,
mhm.
and narrated by her dad. And he speaks about a soldier when he goes to the United States, giving him a blanket because he was so cold, and the soldier sacrificed his blanket and gave it to him. And he said, "Thank you, generous monster," something to that effect. I am not. What did any of you have any idea what that was about? Because he's saying, "Thank you, kind monster," or "generous monster," something to that effect. Did anybody
So
have? Mhm.
I didn't, but when I answered the
Yeah,
question, I was really stuck on the question. And so I jump in and say I didn't, because I also thought it was something slightly bigger. I thought it was more like external things. It was like oppression. Was it disease? Was it death? Was it pain in general? Or kind of hurts that we have? And so in that context, as he is forced to go and serve in the US Army, the soldier, who even the kindest of soldiers, is a representation of his colonizer. And so
Mhm.
that's what he's saying. But yeah, I was really curious about that, because I also was like, what is this monster? Because I'd also been in another conversation where someone had said when they got to the middle of the book, they found the monster. And so I got to the middle of the book and I was like,
That's
monster,
very superficial. No, that is a very superficial reading of the novel. I don't see how you could just jump to we found the monster. Now I think you have to that really.
not saying, well,
Yeah.
and that's what I thought was going to happen, and I was a bit like, oh, okay, I'm still not sure. And I got to end, and I was like, I feel like I didn't run into the monster. So the
But he,
Senator
but
labyrinth.
he actually talks about that. If you when you read this chapter, he actually talks about who the monster is in this chapter.
Yeah, but I don't think that is the entire answer.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not the
You know?
entire thing because then, yeah.
This is why I think this book is worth several reads.
Mm,
Yeah.
that
All
makes sense. Can I ask a question, Paula?
Go ahead, Tessa.
So most of us have also read Tiphanie Yanique's first novel, Land of Love and Drowning.
Mhm.
And that I felt was very much rooted in the US Virgin Islands. It was kind of a historical novel in lots of ways. And in this book, whereas the Caribbean identity of a set of her characters is very much part of the story, and to the extent that some people would argue perhaps it's another character, I feel like this novel was a much more diasporic novel, perhaps even more of an American novel. And I kind of wondered, what do people think about that? Do other people feel differently, similarly? And I think for me, I was sad to see less of the Caribbean than I had hoped going into the novel. I think is probably what I'll say. But I wonder what other people think.
Don't you have
Well,
to
if I could
sorry.
jump, sorry, Paul, if I could jump to Tiffany's rescue here. She is US Virgin Island, right? And it is although the islands are so close to each other, in this chain, the U.S. Virgin Island experience is it's definitely more of an American feel, okay, an American relationship. Plus, I think her own exposure in the USA, underpins a lot of how she moves about, how she navigates through her writing. There are lots of Caribbean parts, Kessoa, the sea, the jumping off the cliffs, all those things is what we do, right? A lot of the beach stuff, and I think Tiffany's a beach bum. Sorry, Tiffany. but no, I mean, I take back the word bum, but definitely somebody who likes to lime on the beach is what I that certainly influences the writing. But to say there wasn't more of the Caribbean in it, there's definitely that side of the Caribbean in it, the beach side, the water side, so I was okay.
But Tessa, why don't you get to grow as a writer? I mean,
I don't think it's about growing as a writer, because that would suggest that as a less mature writer, she writes about the Caribbean, and then.
Let me explain what I mean. Okay, the rule: you write what you know, right? So her first novel is based in the Caribbean. I suspect primarily because she wrote it when she was younger. It was closer to the time when she lived in the Caribbean. Now what she knows is a different experience. She knows the experience of being a Caribbean person living on the mainland USA. I think she's just writing what she knows. Also, in this novel is so different than what was the first one again?
Land of Love and Drowning. I mean, agree.
It's so different. I mean, Land of Love and Drowning is magic realism. There's no magic realism in this one. I think she's just growing as a writer. She's feeling out, what is right for me at this point. Land of Love and Drowning is a brilliant novel, just I think as brilliant as this one. But I think she's just spreading her wings and seeing what else there is out there. And she's also writing in the present. Speaking of writing in the present, who else was blown away by the fact that she starts this novel in about, I think we first meet Fly's parents
in the 1980s.
In about the late 1980s. But later, I had thought that the novel started in the late 1980s, but later when I read it, I realized that we go back as far as 1982. Because I think the first thing we see are the California wildfires in 1989. But then somewhere in the middle, I saw some things happening in 1982. I think that may have been with Mermaid living in the orphanage. But who else was blown away by the fact that she wrote this absolutely amazing, brilliantly crafted novel and could not have finished before 2019 and was still able to tie all these ends together to make this absolutely, I was amazed because
Well, she actually would have finished it after 2020.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, and
Yeah.
but it's still brilliant crafted. You know, you'd think that the fact that she had to be writing so late in the day would have made the quality of the novel suffer, but it certainly didn't.
No, I would.
No, I think
I had a
she
similar
did
thought. Like,
a lot of excellent research. Definitely. But didn't she? I think she said I mean, this is not a novel that she it finished with recent events, but I believe she started it
Yes, she said
many
she
years ago.
surprised when
Yeah,
somebody mentioned that she had been speaking about um well, not the novel so much, but bits of it about as far back as about 15 years ago.
right.
So clearly
Yeah,
she's been writing it for a long time, but
right.
that she's writing about Black Lives Matter, about
the
Trump,
pandemic.
about the post-truth era. I mean, that means a lot of this work was done very, very recently.
Well, I
And
could
then
argue.
it goes even to COVID,
Yeah,
the pandemic.
yeah,
And I found
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
amazing.
and I thought that she handled all of that really well because, she talked when she was talking about the things that happened in the 80s when she was, when was it when Stella was a teenager. I mean,
no,
they
yeah,
just
that would have been
that would have was it Mermaid?
Marisol.
Oh, it was
No, mermaid. That her mother was a
Mermaid.
teenager.
Yeah,
yeah,
but it wasn't Mermaid. It would have been. Oh no, it was. It was
it was more.
Eleonora.
It was
Eleonora.
Okay.
When
Mhm.
Eleonora was a teenager, I mean, it brought me right back to those days, like the way that she described all of those events. Guess what this might be before your time.
That, yeah, it was the diapers at the
So,
time.
and I think that was brilliant to me because she really handled those historical details. I felt really, really well and really cleverly. I don't want to give anything away, but
That,
the big major event of Eleanora's life that she spoke about, the way that she handled that, I thought that was really, really well done.
yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, that actually pulled me into the novel because I have memories of the historical events
Right,
that
exactly.
she's describing, and
Yes,
it made it personal.
yes.
I kind of bonded with the characters because I could relate to what was happening.
Hmm.
All right.
So, and as you all on that theme, and I suppose we are all hijacking your theme, Paula, by throwing our own questions. But
No, it's fine.
yeah, the time spent on the space shuttle story, I've also found to be of interest, and I was kind of wondering what it'll be nice to speak to Tiffany Yanique to find out what is her fascination with um, that particular aspect that she captured.
Yeah.
I see Eric wanting to come in. Eric, you want to come in?
Yeah, I do. In reading that section of the book, and yeah, that was 1986 when that happened. I was, depending on the month, I would have been either a junior or a senior in high school. I think I would have been 17. I would have been a senior in high school, senior. So I was 17 years old. I remember that. And I remember the story was about the woman who was the school teacher. That was the hype. That was the national hype. Not so much on Ronald McNair. When in my community, obviously, it was about Ronald McNair.
Yeah.
So I think she's
For us in the
inserting
Caribbean,
that.
too, Eric. For us in the Caribbean, it was about him.
Great, as well as it should have been.
Mhm.
So she inserted that, which is actually shifting that narrative away from the sole focus on, and I can't remember the school teacher's name. Um, but again, I just remember that national news and national coverage of that event was a tragedy, definitely of all of them dying. But we knew the focus was on the white woman who was a school teacher and not on Dr. Ronald McNair.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think what she's doing, yeah, she's shifting that narrative, um, shifting the
And
narrative.
that's really interesting as well because we heard her speak,
Right, I was about to
Francine
say.
and I,
Yeah.
yeah, about when her, and she does exactly the same thing in Land of Love and Drowning. So for those of us who picked it up and we're not familiar with U.S. Virgin Islands history and representations, we just saw interesting people and a fantastic story. But what she says is a lot of the main characters in the book that we loved were actually secondary characters in books about the white people that she had turned into secondary characters in her novel, if that makes sense. So there had been books written by foreigners from outside about various people, and that had been the narrative about the U.S. Virgin Islands through these different stories. And she took those main characters and turned them into secondary characters and told a whole different story. So it just sounds like she's done exactly the same again, and that's kind of an exciting technique. I think as historians, Eric and I will appreciate. But I think we can all look forward to other things that other times she does that and other stories that she tells.
Yeah, well, and it goes back to the truism that we have to tell our own stories, which is why one of the reasons we do this program.
Yes.
We want to highlight books that tell our stories. What's the South African? There's a South African proverb.
You mean the Lion and the Hunter?
Yes.
Right.
Hunting
Yes.
skills will always glorify the hunter until the lion tells the story. And so what we do as in page turners is the lions are telling the story here. Now, faith is an important preoccupation in the novel. I'm trying to find how I wrote the question. Yes, so faith is a significant preoccupation of the novel. What do the various characters have faith in, and what becomes of the faith of each character? Who wants to take that on? Somebody take it on.
I can take it on at first.
All right.
I mean, definitely when we open up the book, I mean, we are confronted with two characters who are persons of faith, or person of fates, in the plural, in terms of Gary Lovett. So it's a theme that runs throughout. Elnora, she's raised in the church. Her grandparents. You have the itinerant preacher who
Pastor John.
Yes, John the Baptist,
Yeah.
who draws a fly in, and mermaid, the cussing Catholic. Mermaids. I mean, the husband who becomes stepfather of Stella. Me and Johan. Everybody. Stephen Jones.
And the
They're
Tiffany
all in
Tempest.
churches. Yes.
Yeah, and Fly's experience when he was at university with what was her name? Susanna. Susanna.
Becca?
Susanna.
No, was it Susanna?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Right. Oh, that's another symbol. Eh? You remember John the Baptist playing "Oh Susanna," and then flying to university and meet Susanna.
Okay, I definitely need to read the book again.
Yeah.
Oh, you definitely do. But Fly's faith I found was very interesting. I think his faith was more, as much as he criticizes his father's skipping from faith to faith. I think Fly's faith, his expression of faith was very similar to his father's. It certainly wasn't a traditional expression of faith.
Oh, that's interesting. I read him as the most sincere believer in lots of ways, actually, because although he kind of comes and
sincere,
say that again,
sincere every time he changed faith.
True.
There was no hypocrisy there.
But I thought that Gary was kind of I mean, I suppose in some ways they use it in the same way, don't they? It's for both of them. It's almost like a crutch to save them from their demons. And so Gary has these different tools, these different types of songs, whether it's the Buddhist songs or the chants or the different. He draws on these different religious traditions. Whereas I think sincere is probably not the right word. I think I mean that Flies probably feels the most consistent because I think he's a consistently, he kind of finds faith very young and he kind of sticks to a kind of quite traditional Christianity, It just fluctuates as people's faiths do sometimes. And so at various points, it's more prominent in his life than others.
But
That's how
Paula,
I read it anyway. But
okay, so
sorry, but quite different, I thought, from Stella's, which kind of comes at like it's kind of she needs a miracle. It has this kind of faith. It's less of a real faith, and it's more like I just need a miracle. If there's a God, please save me now.
But Stella's faith. Stella loses her faith, but I think she moves towards regaining it towards the end of the novel. So she has this very traumatic experience, and it causes her that triggers the loss of faith. But then when she finds Fly and she starts to rebuild her life, then she didn't embrace a traditional faith, but then I think she believed in something after that. Tony, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, something slightly tangentially, right?
Right.
Here's what I found a little eerie. We're still on the faith thing, but I want to deal with something specifically. Pastor John the Baptist and his van, and pulling up next to the ice cream truck, and I thought that was that had some meaning, right? Because you know what happens with ice cream trucks? They pull kids in, okay, the music and all that. And here's this wagon of faith contesting and actually rendering the ice cream truck almost, invisible. And pulls Fly in that part where I'm not spoiling the book. I got really scared.
I got scared. I thought something terrible was going to happen.
I thought, oh,
Yes, same.
But yes, but look at how eventually, how everybody, although they didn't give up their church per se, they gave John the Baptist a lot of attention. I mean, he got the whole village.
Because he was giving them something exciting that they were.
He was giving them candy, like the ice cream truck.
Yeah,
that's the point.
That they weren't getting in the traditional church.
But also, why was he telling these crazy versions of Bible stories? Does anybody have an answer for that? I was so curious about this.
Wasn't it working? It was drawing the crowds.
That's really rooted. It's rooted so much in African diasporic history. I mean, we can go all the way back to Father Divine, the early expressions of the Nation of Islam, Black Hebrew Israelites. We find these variations, these variant stories to, the received text. We have 66 books of the Bible, the English Bible. This is common. It was common. It's common. I mean, that was so real. That was so real to me. This kind of street preaching, and also when somebody went inside, he was like, "Hey, what you doing here?" And then we find out that this dude travels throughout, and he has different names, and he's doing this and doing that, and he's getting his money, and he's moving on.
But so cleverly, because he doesn't ask for money at first, right?
The break in a minute. Let's take the break now, and we can come back to the faith issue when
okay.
we return.
I have something I want to say.
Let's take the break.
All right.
Hello, everyone. I'm Roger Williams, and today I'll be reading from Tiphanie Yanique's Monster in the Middle, The Story of Stella's Dad. Fort Jackson, South Carolina, 1993. Listen, daughter, there is no way to know anything for sure, and thank God for that. Thank God for that New Year's Day, 1968. That day the monster was on my back. But then again, the monster has always been coming for me. I'm a warm-blooded person because of where my blood comes from, island blood. Thank God for that blood and for that island. But sweet Stella, I'd never been so cold. The monster was in the air. Maybe the monster was trying to nab me, eat me. But there I was. I was the kind of boy, and I was still a boy, who'd come to wear sweaters in the summers of South Carolina. Let my mother kiss my forehead that morning, then climbed aboard a plane, Nothing with me but a bag, one change of light clothes suitable for the West Indies, a toothbrush and a razor, the last because my mother had heard that there would be no one there who knew how to cut my black boy hair, though she hadn't thought about my needing a winter coat. And thank God for that long plane ride where I was too excited to be scared and so watched the sky. And for that long sleepless bus ride where my sudden fear kept me from rest. Thank God for the St. Thomas boy in a bus. Me, not sleeping, but looking out the window as it became winter before my eyes. Cold monster. Did I clarify that it was New Year's Day? That the kiss was my mother's last? She was dying of cancer. You know that part already, right, sweet girl? Breast, though no one but me and a doctor over in Puerto Rico knew. I wasn't allowed to tell a soul because sickness of the breast or the uterus or any part of the body we call private, the parts we use to love, to make life, sickness in those parts was a shameful thing. And so I boarded that plane and climbed aboard that bus, maybe heading to my own death, not sure, but feeling also that I'd likely never see my mother again. But still, thank God for the burn in my mother's breast before I left. Thank God for her kiss goodbye that let me know it was indeed goodbye. I could tell you more about my mother, your grandmother. I should, for even she is the monster, and her mother too. I just want to explain how this goes. It's a journey, but you're not alone in it, my love. None of us is. You feel alone, but also you take the journey because you don't want the loneliness. Maybe people go off to war because they want to be left alone, but left alone and lonely? Different things, those. Me? I didn't want either, baby. Just don't be confused by my life or all these lives. It's easy, really, to understand. See, these lives are yours. Have I made it clear that I am so thankful? Thank God for my memories and thank God for the memories that made me. We can't outrun the monster. Run, monster. And girl, did they make us run that first night. The winter air like pins in my nostrils. I had a bloody nose before a mile, but kept running because the drill sergeant was shouting and because everyone else was running too. No matter that I was in short pants in air colder than I had ever known. Thank God for the short pants. Thank God for the ash on my knees that looked like a disease. Thank you for the blood in my nose that busted out and coated my mouth and neck and shirt and scared the sergeants just enough. That night I shivered so loudly that a bunkmate threw his blanket on me. Thank you, mate monster, generous monster. Thank God that extra blanket helped. I slept, but it started again and again. Every morning the blasted running, every night the cold, and the sweating in the cold, and the sweat freezing me, and the letter in the mail before basic was even out telling me that my mother was dead. The question you must have is, what is at the middle of it all? I'll tell you, even though I shouldn't. Doesn't matter. You still have to do the thing to know it. So what's there at the middle? Myth and magic both. No shame in that. We all know it takes a village to raise a child, but I can tell you honestly that it takes an ancestry to make a man or a woman. I would never have made it to my middle if it wasn't for my mother dying and for my daddy already being dead, because then I would never have signed myself up for a war we would surely lose, a war everyone else was running from. My father had been fighting a war his whole life. A white man he was, from the continent, a proper American, but not white, white. Cajun, he always insisted, had fought in a war or two, seen nothing but combat. Finally, too shocked in the mind and broken in the body, and so found himself stationed in the Virgin Islands, St. Thomas. But it wasn't sunny for him. Lived on our island, but lived like he was already dead. Absent without leave in no time. Made a half-breed baby who looked nothing like him, me. then sat down on the bench outside a rum shop, praying aloud to die until he did. But even that I'm thankful for. Thank you, old monster. Thank you, dear suicidal poppy. I went to the American war to outwar him, but then my mother died, and it was so cold and well.
Well, that reading was just to give you a taste, a first-hand taste of the novel. Believe me, you want to read this novel. It is absolutely brilliant. But we were talking about faith before before we took the break. I have a question for Eric, our man of faith. Eric, aren't you allowed to refashion your faith if it is not serving you? I mean, when, for example, the Nation of Islam reinterpreted Islam to fit their African American reality, isn't that one of the functions of faith? Aren't you allowed to do that? Aren't you allowed to interpret it to serve you if the traditional expression of faith does not serve you?
I wholeheartedly agree. And in the same Protestant Christian tradition, but also say Roman Catholic tradition throughout history, people who have been oppressed, they've received the faith, they've received Christianity in context of oppression. They have recontextualized the stories, recontextualize the faith, yes, to meet their needs, to help overcome. I mean, this is something that I teach in my classes. We have historical examples of that, and I tell them that there's a reason why liberation theology came out of South America and not from the United States. There's a reason why there's a black theology.
There's a reason why Rastafari came out of Jamaica.
Exactly. White folks in the United States, they didn't come up with no spirituals. They didn't have to sing spirituals.
Precisely.
So yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that point.
Yeah. Anybody else want? Because it seems to me that the faith issue excited everybody. Or are we? Francine, you had wanted to say something?
I just wanted to get back to Pastor John the Baptist. When we were talking about him, and he travels all around and he tells the different stories. Would we consider him a griot?
A griot?
Griot?
No,
Is it griot or griot
yeah,
in the
griot.
African tradition?
Yeah, I think it's pronounced griot.
Yeah, I was going to pronounce it griot.
I think he was just a charlatan. But if the charlatan appeals to people and they're getting something good out of it, why not? I don't know. I don't have any judgment.
I felt like he was really smart. Like everybody saw him. The fact that he didn't ask for money from the beginning meant that he sort of earned people's trust. That meant that he was there for like 6 weeks, and then the buckets came out. And you got the sense that like this is what he came for. We just didn't know what was going on for a while, but now we're here. It's gonna cost.
Yeah.
So now I thought it was interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I want to embrace what Francine is asserting there, because I mean, just the griot function as a historian. He functioned as the person who carried the traditions of the people forward, and there was always music involved and that sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, definitely. Here is a recontextualization of I would say the spirit of the griot. I mean, this man knows how to tell stories. He's a storyteller. He knows how to spin these stories and to address his audience and get into exactly what they want to hear. So I would say yes. I mean, I think the spirit of the griot is alive, especially in the Baptist tradition that I grew up in and that I'm still culturally a part of. Black preaching is steep in, I would say, the spirit of the griot. It's scintillating. And you couldn't pay me no more to sit under some white preaching. I'm glad I'm saying, hey, whatever, it go out to whoever, yeah, I'm saying it.
No, I don't mind. I will endorse that, Eric. I think the reason I have no use for religion is that I grew up in those white churches. They were just so irrelevant to me culturally. Sitting in an Anglican church, listening to them drone on like in a very English manner, it's so unappealing. I was always bored to death. If I think it was the
So,
goal.
Paula, you escaped the Latin part of the High Mass.
Yes,
You escaped.
I did escape that. But it was still very English and completely just had nothing to do with me. Well, first of all, I had to look at the white male in the stained glass window, and you tell me I'm created in the image of God, and I see a white man. I don't look like that. Anyway, that is a completely different discussion.
But it isn't. No, it isn't. It's exactly the same thing. That's exactly what Eric's saying, right?
Yeah, but that hits on another question that I think you're going to get to, Paula, and that's about experiences in Africa, but particularly in Ghana. And she brought up something in Ghana that jumped out at me and my time in Ghana.
Yes,
so I'm
it did.
gonna fall back on that.
All right, so let's go to that question now. There are several references to Africa in the novel. Even the white people are connected to Africa. Eloise is conceived in Ghana. Johanne is born in and named after Johannesburg. Stella goes to Africa on student exchange. Do you think Africa factors into, well, this is presupposing that we had discussed the quest for paradise, which I think is one of the themes I see in the novel. Do you think Africa factors into the quest for paradise? And if so, do you think what do you think the author is saying about the significance of Africa and the quest for paradise? That's not exactly what you were saying, Eric, but I'm really interested to hear what you wanted to say.
Yes, I appreciate that eventually someone went to the continent, one of the main characters, and so it was, in this case, it was Stella. I also appreciate that Africa, in this case Ghana, but I think it's representative of the continent here, was not romanticized.
Yep.
And I'll be the first one to tell you that when I was in college, Africa meant something to me. I was in a quest, and I think the question about searching for paradise and that sort of thing, and then connected it to Africa, I think it's appropriate. It's more than appropriate because I was searching for my African identity. I did change my name, not legally, but I changed my name.
Ooh, what was your African name?
It was Abiola Abasi.
Oh, you went Nigeria.
Ooh, I like it.
Yeah, that's
Like
right.
it.
I felt
Can
it
we
in my
call it Abiola?
spirit.
That's a nice name.
I felt it in my spirit, and yeah, with DNA now, I know the region, and I know at least an ethnic group that I'm descended from. But as an historian, I've never romanticized Africa. And again, I appreciate her doing that.
Yep.
Africa is an enormous continent. Different countries have their own issues. They have their own issues with colonialism. It comes out because she mentions in the text about white Jesus.
Yes. Yes.
I was stunned.
Yeah.
I was stunned when I was in Ghana and I saw the images of white Jesus. But I thought about it. I said, you know what? Ghana is black. They can have a white Jesus and not particularly worry about assimilation to white culture. Not to say that doesn't happen, because definitely people colonialism, the legacy of colonialism. But here in the diaspora, especially in the United States, black folk, hey, we made Jesus brown in the early 20th century.
So, earlier.
Yeah, black Jesus, that's part of us. We really push back against that.
Well, I will tell you that in the Caribbean, the white Jesus thing is still a problem.
Yes,
Every
definitely.
major church has images of white Jesus, and I will tell you that there is a certain cathedral in Kingston where Jesus and the disciples are white and the devil is black.
Wow. There's a church.
Time I have a reason to go to that cathedral because all of you know I don't go to church, but there are sometimes there's a reason for me to go to church. Every time I go to that church, I look at those things, those images, and I get really angry. And the thing is that children are absorbing this, because when every child who goes in there sees these images, and the children are absorbing the messages that come from these images. You don't have to say it to them in so many words. And that is doing a lot of damage to those kids. That needs to be addressed.
I just wanted to say that there's a church, a cathedral, I believe, in Cashmere, St. Lucia, where the opposite, no, not the opposite is true. But what I remember being stunned to see a Black Jesus and Black disciples in the center of town in the capital of St. Lucia. So I think work is happening.
That's wonderful.
It's beautiful.
They need to come here and fix ours.
Well, before you move on, I'm just gonna, with the permission of the panel, put another sort of spin on the relationship with Africa and with how Africa featured, how she brought it into the book. There's a lot of DNA weaving going on in this novel, from the start right through, right? So a lot of DNA threads. And I'm wondering if the significance of everybody going to Africa isn't somehow another story that she's trying to tell. The fact that she took a lot of time to connect a lot of characters in this book down a DNA thread. I'm just wondering if that also doesn't have some significance, or am I just sort of imagining something that isn't there?
Eric, I see you nodding. You want to answer that?
No, I think Tony, I think you're onto something. I'm thinking of the character Malika or Malika, however you want to pronounce her
Malika, yep.
Malika. Mm-hmm.
Malika, she's a mysterious person, artist, beautiful, fluid in her in her sexuality, winsome and everything. I mean, I pictured her a certain way. I said, "Oh, I know her."
Ooh.
But here's the thing, though: when Stephen was trying to find out more information because he wanted to go see her stuff, her exhibits, conflicting information. Because she said she told one person, I'm not going to do spoilers here. One person, oh, I'm from Ethiopia. Somebody else that she was closely with for a season, I'm from Kenya. And then we find out that, oh no, she's from the Bay Area. And then, oh, what is this?
I'm South Africa. That was another story.
Yeah. And then she said, no, I'm going to Africa. And Stephen wanted to go to Africa. So yes, there's this pull. I think with Tony's point is that yes, this book, or maybe like a subsequent book by Tiphanie Yanique, could be centered on Africa and the diaspora, that pull that we all have as African descendant people in the diaspora, that we're pulled to the continent.
And it's not just the continent. We're pulled towards community with each other. As people of African descent, because Maristella, she loves Stephen. There's no doubt about that. But she has this nagging sense of discomfort about the fact that she has this white boyfriend. And
you mean Johan?
Johan, sorry, I said Stephen, didn't I? Right.
Although was that a Freudian slip?
Right.
Because he was raised by white people.
Yeah, because he's raised by white people. He's not black enough for her. And so she's exploring all of those issues that we have because we were pulled away from our origins. You know, the yearning for our origins. And then when you are faced with the reality of your origin, you realize that it's not this fantastic fairy story, there are problems just like everywhere else. But she, that is an important theme in the book. And Stephen himself, who is raised by white parents, has has a relationship with somebody who is not white but very pale, and he himself is very uncomfortable with that. So she's exploring all of these issues we have around loss of our origin. And I think she does it brilliantly because I think all of us have felt that, have in some to some degree have felt that.
One of the things I found interesting about that is the fact that Stephen is black, but he's African American, raised by white people, and she felt she had way less in common with him. She was surprised, in fact, at one point to not have as much in common with him as she thought she would, given that he's black. And I found it interesting. Hello, we seem to be having some technical problems and we've lost Paula. So I will be stepping in as temporary host for our last 5 or so minutes. And I'm going to hand you over to Kesawa, who wants to pose a question.
Yeah. So this isn't too much of a spoiler to say that you might find as you read the book that one of the key characters has a sort of kleptomaniac tendency, we might say, but it's very subtly done. And so I guess the question for you guys is, did it bother you before she has to reckon with it publicly? And why is it written that way? Is it a stress reaction? Is it a chink in her otherwise respectable armor?
I wasn't bothered by it until, as you put it, publicly, she had to publicly recognize it or deal with it. I looked at it from my own culture, from like South Louisiana culture, where you don't leave stuff behind, because if you leave something of yours behind and somebody gets it, they can maneuver things in your life. Let me put it that way. It's like it's just voodoo. You don't leave articles of clothing around. You don't leave your hairbrush, hair comb, none of that stuff. So I thought she was taking those types of things that have like points of contact. It didn't occur to me that it was some kind of manic tendency until the end.
Tony?
But it did. I mean, without spoil. I mean, the thing is, it climaxed into that habit, climaxed into something that nearly got her into serious trouble. I mean, that was Tiffany's way of showing, as we're talking about monster, that I guess there's several references to this word monster too. That was a monster in her, in the middle of her, she couldn't deal with, or kept controlling her, you know. But I saw it. Those of you going to read the book, we're not going to spoil it anymore for you. But yeah, the habit got her into hot water, and that to me was one of her monsters.
I guess my other question then was, when I was thinking about it, why is she doing this? What is this about? Why is this author's clearly a very brilliant woman? Why has she inserted these small sentences here and there, peppered throughout? And I wondered, it's a question again, do you think that possibly both the kleptomania and the pornography addiction that she kind of hints at is not kind of described like that she hints at in another character, are they expressions? Are they two sides of the same coin? Are they expressions of what we might call intergenerational trauma, or are they perhaps legacies of the stories that come before them? Because both of them are echoes of much louder of things that their parents have done. With Darlene, we see the stealing of the necklace when she at this kind of key moment, and with Stella, Fly's father, the whole videotape is a whole story, right? So, is it? Eric, like a dying to make a spoiler, but just what I mean. I think it feels like they're much more in the lives of their children, they're much more present than they are in the lives of the parents, but they are nonetheless inherited characteristics or traits. Perhaps, arguably, I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, I'm gonna go back to Francine's interpretation of the monster in the middle. I really believe that what you're hitting on there, Kessaw. You say, it's the trauma in their lives and the trauma of the generations before them. And I keep talking about this DNA thread because I honestly believe that your DNA is not just a physical coding. I think you bring with you the horrors of your past. Yeah, Eric may agree with me because I was never enslaved, but sometimes I'm haunted in a way as if I was. Okay, and it has to be something that's running through my DNA. That that habit, addiction of flies. It's just again one of those things that nagged them, kept them away from being the perfect human beings, if you know what I mean. And maybe even it is what the attraction was, the invisible attraction. Anyway, the fact that Fly is screwed up in that sense, and Stella is screwed up in that in another sense, but there's some kind of commonality in terms of the trauma that they bring and the imperfections that they bring that keep them together.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned you used the word invisible there, Tony, because there's another obsession of Fly, and I really connected with that. He has all these copies of the Invisible Man, and as I'm the book, and I'm reading that. I mean, it definitely when you read in the text, you should be able to see the connections. I'm not going to say anything else about it, but I'll just bring my own example. I think I own maybe 6 or 7 copies of Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. I don't loan them out. They're mine. If I say, hey, maybe you should read Chinua Achebe. So you have a copy? I said, I'll buy you a copy. Mine stay with me. The first one I read back in 1990 to I get them in different colors and different covers. Is it an obsession? Yeah, but it also relates to my love for that story and my connection to that story. So yeah, we all have these little things. Some, according to society, are huge things. Some tiny things, and they're just quirks, idiosyncrasies. But yeah, I think at the bottom line, we all have these things. Whether they'll wind you in jail is one thing, or something else, but we all have these things. This is like part of our human experience, common human experience. Even with Johan wanting to control sexuality or the sexual experience in his relationship with Stella. I mean, that's a thing. Stephen had his thing. I mean, they all had their things.
Yes, and speaking of Joanne, his thing apart from that was also labyrinths. He was obsessed with labyrinths. And I'm wondering if these little addictions aren't like the way that the younger generation manifests whatever the mental illness that ran through these two families, basically. Because we spoke about mental illness before. And so they were not as deeply affected, perhaps, as their parents and grandparents, but, they're both addicted to certain things that basically, I guess, that are helping them to fight the monster in the middle, perhaps. And on that note, we've run out of time. Thank you very much for joining us for another book review discussion. We have had a wonderful time. Goodbye.